the larger proportion, the larger population of India has been like missed out from reclaiming, the rights, the constitutional rights. What Professor Afroz Alam was mentioning, rights with the dignity. Even if they are given the rights, it's not given with the dignity. They can be like put behind the bars. We can see that who are the people who are mostly under trials, who are put who are charged with the laws which Dr. Ayaz Ahmed was talking about. This whole concept of religious nationalism, it itself is very much interesting and intriguing. Um, and we would like to touch upon it, but taking this conversation ahead, I would like I just want you just want all of your comments on this very concept of how, like, this nationalism, republic, and we can see this the concept of religious extremism. And we are seeing a kind of India which is very much divided. And there are the certain people who are just going against and saying a certain section of India is going against and saying, branding the people who are protesting as the anti-national, and the people who are protesting, they clearly able to say that they are not just giving us the right and we have to reclaim it. We are saying we are in a point where there are not very much space for having a discussion or dialogue or to understand the things, but we are seeing a very two extreme points where both of them are in the sort of conflict. So I really want to understand from all of you is that how you see the current situation, how you see what all the observations, observations on the current situation, and how you observe and how you see that the next decade of how will be the next decade of Indian Republic. So I'll start with Professor Afroz Alam, sir.
All right, Anwarul, how do I see the state of contemporary times and the future time, which is awaiting us? My point is, see, we are talking about rights. The point is, what is given to us is not important. The point is, are we capable enough to exercise? The point is that my capabilities, and if not, what are those things which are creating an obstruction?
The connectivity, there's some connectivity issue. Taking the same question ahead, Dr. Ayaz Ahmed, would you like to give us your observation and understanding over the same, how you see the current situation of India?
Yeah, yeah,
and,
yes, sir.
uh,
Yeah.
and how you see the, I think Professor Afroz Alam is back. Okay.
So I don't know what happened, but the whole dilemma is the same people who were united as one in fighting against an enemy day and night with a certain sense of consciousness of their own started losing it after independence. So they are not coming out with the similar popular energy against their own people, because they think that the ruler is someone amongst us. Is this a helplessness, or is there certain structured ways of controlling the minds, assumptions, and ideas of the people? How are they being seduced? My whole problem is that the government is overconfident in controlling the behavior of the people without letting critical questions to face it. I have a problem with the overconfidence of the people, overconfidence of the governments. That how overconfident they are that whatever they may do or they are able to do, they are getting popular approval. Election after election, election after elections, the community who is being most hated, the community who is being most disliked and distrusted, is still able to enjoy the popular legitimacy. So my problem is that, do we lack political education? What we have done, are we able to develop a political question, a political culture where a critical thinking has taken shape? No. We immediately after independence, we become a lethargic citizens. We become a motionless lethargic citizen who is happy, who is caught in 24 into 7 into how do I earn more and more. In that struggle, a certain class of people who has to experience poverty, who has to experience starvation, who has to experience stigma, who has to experience that caste discriminations, who has to experience Islamophobia, Hinduphobia, whatever maybe you call it, still they are not able to rise. If they are able to rise, then the government is coming out with the repressive measures with a greater sense of immunity, and those thinkers, intellectuals, artists, painters, politicians who were once radical in their thought become more submissive in their attitudes. So they are more interested in sustaining the status quo, that they are more interested not in awakening the masses, because the mass awakening, the political education of the larger masses of the category, we have left that agenda. Or that is why we are not able to produce a conscious citizenry who can put pressures. The government shall be dependent upon the will of the people, but now the will of the people is dependent upon the government. So now government is deciding factor in creating the will of the people. This is your will. This is your agenda. Here is my problem. The problem is, in coming 10 years, what is going to happen? Whatever we have attained, our democracy is at stake. We are moving towards a totalitarian society where every aspect of our life is controlled and dominated by somewhere, and still we are happy with, because we don't know that who is controlling us. Who's controlling us? There are certain invisible forces, particularly naming it tech giants, who are taking our rights, liberties, and our role as people. And these agencies which are in power at the moment, they are into such kind of illusions, using the method of illusion, I can say that those certain signs are there, that they think they are doing service. In fact, they are serving some external agents. A time will come, these governments will be replaced. They are mocking merely as an agent. That is why the anxieties of the people, the depressions of the people, the growing inequalities, the stigma having no appeal to the conscience of those who are in government, because they are not having their independent conscience. We are going to produce in 10 years more criminals in the parliament, more corporates in the parliament. We are going to produce more, you can say that, the illiterates in the parliament. So they will be lost in their luxuries, while the real sufferers will be you and me and everyone. The problem is that they are not able to realize that in 10 years down the lane, India is going to experience a huge crisis in terms of economy, that its 25% working force is not going to stay there. Every year we are adding 10 to 15 millions of people who need job, but the government is not able to do that. Every year there is a rural urban divide. You know that we will be overcrowded. There is no space, there is no infrastructure. We are more into that digital plans, and the digital plans is not having a concrete framework where we will be able to balance between our freedom and something which is losing it at the cost of it. So we are going to have a different, and that is why, how to avoid that? There is an agricultural crisis, there will be an economic crisis, there will be a political crisis, and how are we going to rationalize it? The government is having no plans at their hand. So what they will do, they will spiritualize every problem. So your poverty is spiritual poverty. Your unemployment is spiritual unemployment, and you will be lost in that maze. You will be more. Who is it? They will create your immediate enemies because they don't have a substantive solution. So they will create your enemies. Your unemployment is because of the Muslims who are there taking your opportunities. So if they will be out of their land, who is going to occupy that land? You will be occupying that land. Their houses is your houses. Their jobs will be your jobs. So the whole consciousness is being polarized at multiple angles. And if that is being settled, they will be talking about the Savarnas and the Ashrafis. The whole point is that. So they are seducing that you are dying for a cause, and that cause has no foundations in economics, has no foundations in politics. The idea is you will be totally at loss because your enemies, because you are not able to treat government as your enemy. You are able to treat your fellow citizen as your enemy. So your problem, that problem is this, that the government is washing its hands away, and simply you are fighting amongst yourself because they have manufactured a cause of your problem, for your poverty, for your stigma, for your discrimination. Now government is not responsible. Who is responsible? Your fellow citizens. And therefore turn your gun to them, and therefore we are becoming uncritical, motionless, lethargic citizens fighting with our own brothers instead of holding the government accountable. We are into a very, very bad situation. Imagine the situations. By 10 years, India will have around 35% population young. In fact, that is 31 years median age. More and more youth will come, and those youth without job, how are they going to experience that? More and more cities will come where the business of the corporates will sustain, but at the same time, my problem is not poverty, my problem is inequality. Inequality is going to reign, and that will create chaos. There will be disorders, and here you will create more laws, but those laws will create more disorders than order. So the problem is this, and that is what we are experiencing at farm laws. That farm laws are creating more disorders. What kind of, the law has to maintain order. Law has to answer the aspirations of the people. And now that the idea of people, the day is no far when we as people will die in the realm of our own ideas. We will be merely a robot. We are going to be a remote. Our autonomy is at stake. We have become heteronomous, mind my language. Somebody is going to control and still controlling my behavior. The way I think, the way I eat, the way I dress, there is no cognitive critical thinking. And that is why I appreciate, if you are not cynical, you are a loser. Develop negative thinking. That is the only panacea. Doubt what is being proposed before us. That is why don't submit. Don't go with the material, because you are under attack from thousands of the sources which you treat as organic material and content. And I'm worried about my future. And I am worried about my people. That is what I see. Thank you. Well, sir.
Thank you, sir. You have using like a very, very, very harsh word, and very much like explained your understanding of, and the things which we are going through, and then the behavior, and you have mentioned a very interesting thing, that the government is, this government is deciding the mood of the country. This is very much unusual. It's the people who are supposed to set the agenda. It's the people who are supposed to decide what they want and what they don't. And that is what we are seeing, in the farmer protests. They are resisting a law. So, going to Dr. Ayaz Ahmed, how much do you agree to what Professor Alam has said, and what's your understanding of the same situation?
Well, Anwarul, I will have some difference of opinion with my mentor and my teacher, Professor Afroz Alam, on this point, that this increasing hostility in the name of religion that we see, I don't think that it started in 2014, nor do I think that it started in 1950. It has much more broader historical context. Nor do I believe that after the commencement of the constitution, these two nationalisms which were clashing, which led to the partition, that we passed the constitution, and immediately Hindu nationalism and Muslim nationalism, which were at loggerheads, which were violently clashing with each other, they simply somehow disappeared. No, they did not. The nodal points which created Hindu nationalism or Muslim nationalism, they continued to subsist, and they have been they have been continuing. It is not 2014, it is not 1950. And what are the nodal points? If we are to challenge this hostility between and nationalistic, theocratic, religious, nationalistic clashes, we have to destroy brick by brick, step by step, how it has been constructed. Politics is about power struggle. And when we say democratic politics, it is about constructing popular identities, political identities. And if those identities have been constructed in religious terms, then we have to deconstruct it, destroy it. How do we do it? What are the nodal points of Hindu nationalism and Muslim nationalism which were there, which led to partition? Let me just point out some of the nodal points. And they are not in one community. They are not with one set of people. They were spread across, whether it was Congress, Muslim League, or Hindu Mahasabha, or today whether it is Congress, BJP, or even other parties. Nodal points is that you had communal personal laws, that Muslims, Hindus, Parsis, Isais, they will not have relationship with each other. Only Muslim will have family relationship with Muslim. Hindus will have relationship with Hindus. Who imposed it? Who imposed this kind of communal agenda? From 1920s, if you see, it was the Muslim League, the upper caste Muslims, the so-called Ashraf. That is a very important nodal point. It has not been destroyed till date. It continues to be there. Despite the mandate under Article 44 of the Constitution, we have not abolished communal personal laws. We have communal personal laws. Can you believe this? And we don't see any serious voice for common family code. Unless people build relationships, family relationships, social relationships, cultural relationships across religious boundaries, there is no hope. Number one. Number two, you have communal universities. Muslim nationalism and Hindu nationalism, it was built around Aligarh Muslim University. You have continued to have the Muslim University. You continue to have Banaras Hindu University. A Hindu identity is reproduced. It is reproduction of Muslim identity, Hindu identity. It's a very important nodal point. Then you have identification of permanent communal religious minorities in the Constitution. Article 30, religious minority. If you have religious minority, if religious minority is a valid legal constitutional category, then why religious majority should not be a valid category? If we accept and adopt that religious minority is a valid category, then there are going to be set of people who are going to argue that religious majority is also a valid category. So if we are to fight this out, we have to end this clash around religious nationalities and communal fundamentalism and polarization around religious identities, then we have to transcend it, go beyond it. And we say, well, we don't want communal personal laws, we don't want communal educational spaces, we don't want communal practices in social spaces. We'll have to end it. And unless we question that, establish a different identity, that we have this Mool Nivasi identity, Bahujan identity, where people of all marginalized people who may be divided into different religious groups, they are coming together. Baba Saheb Ambedkar built it, Manavar Kashiram built it, Abdul Qayyum Ansari Sahab built it, Asim Bihari Sahab built it. We have Ali Anwar Sahab working very hard around these issues. We have to give up this reference to religion all the time. When the subcontinental society, this subcontinental Indian society has been historically constituted for hundreds and thousands of years around caste. Material resources, power, land, every educational opportunities, all have been redistributed around the identity of caste. And those who are using Muslim nationalism or Hindu nationalism, who have used Hindu nationalism or who have used Muslim nationalism, who continue to use Hindu nationalism and Muslim nationalism, they come from upper caste. Very clear, very clear. Whether it was Muslim League, it was all upper caste. It was all Sayyid Sheikh Pathans. Whether it was Hindu Mahasabha, it was all Brahmin and some other Bania and Rajput caste. Similarly today, Those who advocate segregation in social life, cultural life, they are bound to face political segregation. Unless we end the social segregation, cultural segregation, how are we going to end political segregation? And government is not going to fall from descent from heaven. Government is going to be formed by people from society. And if the society is divided around communal lines, cultural practices are divided around communal lines, the government is going to be communal. We have a communal government therefore in place. So the way I see to establish what Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said, a country where associated form of living, all our aspect of our life are informed by liberty, equality, and fraternity, ensuring the dignity of the, that will come only when we give up this somehow. I mean, this belief that Hindu identity has descended from heaven, Muslim identity has, it is some permanent kind of identity which has fallen from heaven, and we must take it as sacrosanct, as sacred. We know that after 1857, it was brick by brick, it was constructed. You have Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, you have Bal Gangadhar Tilak, you have Muhammad Iqbal, you have Savarkar. So it was constructed. But you also have a third very democratic line. It starts with Baba Kabir, Mahatma Raidas, you have Jyotiba Phule, you have Fatima Sheikh, you have Asim Bihari, you have Shahuji Maharaj. You have this third very important dimension, very important part towards republic, a kind of a republic where you have Begumpura, you have Azadi, Barabari, Bhaichara, you have, so where there is no reference to religion is treated as a matter of personal faith. So you practice this faith, that faith, or you don't practice any faith. That is totally immaterial. That is what Constitution says: freedom of conscience, freedom of belief, faith, and worship. So you have it. But the way to organize popular political struggle for democratic values, for democratic norms, is to give up this. So even if we are to protect Muslims from the kind of a siege or attack which is placed in with reference to Muslim identity, even if we are to protect it, we have to give up that reference. It is not some kind of a holy cow, some kind of a identity which was there forever. It was not there forever. During Mughal period, Muslim identity was not the primary identity. It was the Mughal identity, the Turks' identity, the Pathans' identity, the Brahmins' identity, the Rajputs' identity. It becomes relevant after 1857 when Sir Syed wrote that book, Asbab-e Baghawat-e-Hind. You look at that book. Sir Syed laid down the agenda very clearly. He said that you British, you are fools. You will have to divide this country into two hostile camps. You will have to keep Muslims separate. You have to keep Hindus separate. If they mix with each other, they will join hands and they will overthrow you. 1858 book. And from there on, everything, and then that was picked up by Tilak and Arya Samajis and Brahmo Samajis. You see that kind of a movement taking place, where you organize, picked up Hindu identity and Muslim identity, develop social practices, cultural practices, legal practices. So if today we are to destroy it, if we are to fight it, if we are to establish equality, liberty, fraternity as a norm in the society, then we have to also unravel it slowly, gradually. It is not an impossible task. We know that all identities are socially and historically constructed. There is no fixed permanent identity. Babasaheb, say for example, used to use the word depressed classes. Mahatma Phule used to use the word Bahujan. Then we had Mool Nivasi identity, Bahujan identity. Now we know that the SC, ST, OBC, the 85-90% of population of this country, they may be practicing Christian faith, they may be practicing Islamic faith, some kind of Hindu faith, Sikh faith. It doesn't matter. That is totally immaterial. They are the ones who don't have educational opportunities, who don't have employment opportunities, business opportunities, hardly any representation in media. They have to come together, not under some kind of a religious identity, but an identity which is rooted in the historical context. Anti-caste struggle, where caste is to be destroyed and communalism is to be destroyed, and the solidarity is around resources. Struggle for resources, for power. We have to enter into power struggle. It is not always the kind of a question where we can say, well, suddenly somehow in 2014, the country, what was the response of Mandal by RSS? It was Kamandal. It is so very clear. The strategy of our adversaries, those who do not believe in liberty, equality, their strategy is very clear. The moment some OBC caste got some kind of a representation in government, they immediately Mandal was responded to by Kamandal. So communalism has a very focus point. It is a strategic move. Communalism is not some kind of again preordained destiny of this society. The moment Mandal implementation was announced, Kamandal politics was launched. So communalization, constituting Muslim identity as the other, that constitutes the Hindu identity. And then therefore the entire public space, all debates are submerged into this. Either you want to make Hindu Muslims as friends, or you want to make them enemies. But the discussion has to remain within Hindu, within Muslim, friends or enemies. It doesn't serve any purpose. It has already created one partition, the violence of partition, and then therefore so many riots have taken place. The friendship, all kinds of these Hindu-Muslim friendship slogans, they have Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, where have they led us to? They have led us right here where we are at present. This is playing into the hands of our adversaries. All those upper caste people who, whether they were Muslims or Hindus or whatever identity, religious identity they identified with, they are the ones who are calling the shots, and we are falling into that trap. So if we are to assert ourselves, if we are to reclaim our rights and our identity, then we have to enter into that phase of our democratic republic life where we don't try to organize popular struggle, popular identity around religious symbolism. That would be self-defeating. That is not going to. You see how much can you have more Hindu-Muslim unity slogans than Gandhiji? How much he used to say Hindu-Muslim unity, that didn't serve any purpose. It will. Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad used to say Hindu-Muslim unity. Hindu-Muslim unity slogans are not going to work at all. They only strengthen Hindu nationalism. They only strengthen Muslim nationalism. You only need a sharp political strategist to give it an antagonistic turn, to give it an hostile turn. Because this is an artificial kind of a way of organizing public life in the subcontinent. Religion has never been in a way an identity marker for distribution of material resources, for distribution of power. So we have to avoid that trap, and we have to reclaim a democratic republic in constitutional sense, in a Ambedkarite sense, which has also a very long history, very healthy tradition, and we will have to see that it is not just one group. The majority religion, those who talk in terms of with reference to majority religion, you have already accepted your defeat, that there is a minority under siege, that if Muslims are under siege, and who are attacking them, Hindus are attacking them, we have lost the battle. We have lost the battle for democratic republic. You get the point. So that way I see this kind of 10 years republic from today, if we are to continue on the trajectory which has been laid democratically, where there is equality between genders, equality between different castes, common education, universal common education, proportional representative system, a kind of identity which says religion will not be the ground for you to have family relationship, to establish housing societies, to have educational institutions. Religion should not be the marker. Rather, though, the deprivation on the basis of caste, discrimination on the basis of caste, and people divided into different castes, lower caste, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes, they must come together. And that will be a block which will challenge this antagonism and hostility that we see around religious symbolism. Our symbolism has to move away from this religious symbolism, whether unity or hostility, and get rooted into democratic struggle, which has, from Baba Kabir at least, we have a very healthy and long tradition of this practice, and I think that is our only hope for a democratic republic 10 years from now. Thank you, Anwar. Thanks.
थैंक यू डॉक्टर अयाज अहमद.
ये वीडियो अगर आपको पसंद आया हो तो इसे लाइक करें, कमेंट करें, शेयर करें, और हाँ, हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें, ताकि देश विदेश से जुड़ी खबरें आप मिस ना करें, क्योंकि कोरोना काल में 2 गज दूरी, मास्क है जरूरी. नमस्कार.